Reading. One of the first things that we realised was that we have to start looking at how are these kids going to learn English, and reading is part of it. And we've walked into this world which none of us who have experienced it have made any sense of it yet. And it's over a year later and it's still partially a mystery to us. But it goes something like this. In China, the model for teaching of reading has been unchanged for hundreds of years. They teach the same way as they did 1,000 years ago. Great. They believe that by reading out loud as a group, they, in a sense, are doing it rote. It's like, and they read it out loud every day, preferably before breakfast. That's the best time of the day to learn to read. You didn't know that. But that's the way it works. And what you read, even though younger children will read, what they read is, we would describe, I think, as character recognition. It's word recognition mechanism. What is that character? What's the sound? What's the history of the character? What's the next character? What's the next character? And that's how they're doing their reading. Like a beautiful phrase. Those two characters together sound good together and they look good together. And no, in fact, if I use this other character, that would be better and then it would sound even better. That's very much how their reading develops. As they get older, they are introduced to classical literature. Now try to imagine. To learn English, you will learn English by reading Shakespeare, Chaucer, Dickens, and do all of the poems of Robert Burns and, the Romantics. And that'll be your entire literature for learning English. Away you go. That's the basis of learning to read in Chinese. It is ancient classics. Or, going to read the Iliad translated into English, and we might read, other stuff. Plutarch, whoever, right? But we're going to read ancient texts. All we will see is classical texts. That's what they read. So our students, when a Chinese student teacher said, no, we have to do Chinese reading. I said, great. How are we going to do that? Where's your curriculum? How stupid am I? Where is the curriculum? There is no curriculum. We're going to read this. We're going to read Du Fu's poems on the working class man. Now, I know about Du Fu because he was a great poet from Chengdu. But the point is, he was around 500 years ago, 600 years ago. But that's how we read. And what happens is, the assumption, there's a whole series of assumptions now. All you will read to learn how to read in Chinese is to read the classic literature. You will read it out loud. Eventually you'll start to memorize phrases. And then one day, when you're an adult, the wisdom of that writing will become clear to you. That's how it works. If you go to Chinese adults and say, so did you get the wisdom? Very cheeky, very Australian to ask a question like that. And no, I didn't get all of it. But that is the assumption. That is how I'm going to learn to read. And when I challenged this, when I started to push this through, and I started to work through the logic of this, because I kept sitting down with the teachers and I kept saying, yes, but we need a curriculum. I'm a curriculum guy. Not that I really like to have it all written down, but I really like to see a plan. I like to see, reading sort of, I know enough about reading from a Western perspective, and this is a very Western perspective, is that it's a developmental process. It starts with 0 when they're born, and hopefully we can get them to this point by the time they get out of us and go to high school and go to university and go to the world. And I can see stages along the way that I can analyse and decode, and I can strip it apart and find out what happened with this child's learning, and they're struggling with the grammar here and they're struggling with this, and I can then bring in devices and I can use mechanisms and strategies and I can fix it. So I'd say, so Li Baran, is he going all right with his reading? Oh, he's not very good, says the teacher. So what's wrong with his reading? Oh, he's not very good. So what can you do about it? There's no response. They don't have a mechanism in their world for dealing with reading in the way that we recognise at all. It doesn't exist in their curriculum, doesn't exist in their pedagogy. So children are coming to you having learned how to read in their native tongue without any fundamental feedback in the processes of how to read. They've never experienced it. So then you have to work this through. You say, so why wouldn't Chinese teachers change their teaching methods? And the answer is, I suspect it will never happen. And it would not happen for the following reason. I could hire one of you and say, come to China and work with my Chinese teachers and show them how to decode this classical text so that one of the 13-year-old kids could access it. You could do it. You know, in a bilingual environment, you could figure it out, and you could show them how to teach this 13-year-old how to access the wisdom of that classical text. You could do it. I could do it, but you guys are much better at it. The Chinese teacher won't want to do that. In fact, they would find this really, really odd, but very difficult, because if you succeeded, if you were able to teach a Chinese child how to access the wisdom at the age of 13, it starts to raise a serious question about whether that text had any wisdom at all. Because only adults will ever get it. So from a cultural perspective, not from a logical perspective, which is very Western, from a cultural perspective, they will never teach meaning of text because it threatens their cultural basis. And you would never do that. You would never create a system, an education system, that challenges the core of your educational process, which is reading. Because it would challenge the essence of who we are and the purpose of reading, which is to gain the access to the wisdom when you're an adult. Because it's full of wisdom. And you'll need it when you're an adult, because that's the time. We might argue, you know, I'm a middle schooler, I'd say, well, I needed wisdom when they're 13 because they're going to make these terrible decisions. It'd be nice if they got it then. That argument doesn't work. So you're there, you're trying to teach kids how to extract meaning from a sentence. They have never experienced it. They don't have to. It's not how they read. It's not the purpose of education. So we're asking them to extract meaning from things that we give them. They don't even have a starting point for that. So I think they look at the broad idea. So this is a big idea, and it's sort of these characters, these words all contribute to this idea. But for me, I think their reading and writing is much more like poetry. Their writing is more like stream of consciousness. It's just like, would you like to write? Yes, I would like to write. What would you like to write? And away they go. But it's not planned. There is no order as we would recognize it. Once again, that's a cultural assumption. To a Chinese reader, it makes perfectly good sense. For a Western reader, we wouldn't make any sense of it at all. But it is more like poetry. They use analogies all the time, very much about nature.
Sorry, Richard, is this irrespective of what the task is? So
yes.
we're talking about writing
They'll just write to the task in a very broad sense. Absolutely.
Oh,
a topic will be about, and away and they'll just dump. It's a brain dump.
Yeah.
Whatever they can think of. And this parts to what became very clear to me was that, and to all of us, was that our Greek-Roman rhetoric heritage is so strong in the way that we have developed reading and writing. It's totally shaped it. The whole idea that there's a beginning, middle, and end, that there is a logic, that you have an argumentative process, which is the rhetoric system. You know, I'm going to argue my point. Very Roman. I'm going to argue my point, and I'm going to bring in the evidence to justify it. That's very Greek-Roman. It's still going. We assume that that's good writing. We impose that form of writing on all of our writers. We train all of our students in our schools in that system. And the Chinese students have never heard of it, have no concept of it, never experienced it, and they don't care about it. One of the things that happened was that our English teacher kept saying, the kids are resisting me because I'm asking them to write a paragraph. And they don't see the point of writing a paragraph. If you go to a Chinese student and say, I want you to write 500 words on this topic, they're in their head, the answer is, but 2,000 words would be better. because it's about the fact that when you're reading Chinese literature, it's always big and voluminous, and it goes on and on and on to make the point. So their writing and reading is reflective of that.